thesubstream.com presents Rajo reviewing Friday the 13th. The Stream. I'm Mike from thesubstream.com, and this is my friend Rajo, and he's here to talk about a movie called Friday the 13th. On Friday the 13th, which is a remake of a movie called Friday the 13th.
This movie was awesome. Shockingly so. Like a lot of people I know, I was a child in the 80s, but unlike a lot of people I know, I just never got into horror movies. They just seemed kind of ridiculous to me and maybe a little contrived, and like Freddy Krueger movies where he puts on funny costumes and basically drops pianos on people's heads. He basically turns into like Bugs Bunny. They just seemed kind of ridiculous to me. But I always had a suspicion that Jason Voorhees was a character that maybe could actually potentially be legitimately scary. Just really iconic. He's just this huge guy with a hockey mask, which is kind of a scary image. And he's got a machete and he lives in the forest. Like that's kind of a home run right there, that concept. And apparently the first couple of movies were actually really good, and they sort of carry the story through the first few. Like it's not all about Jason, and he didn't always have the hockey mask. But then after they made the first few, they made 6 more, and all of a sudden you've got Jason who visiting hell, and Jason taking a trip to New York City, and Jason going to outer space. Jason became just as much of a cartoon character as Freddy did. Well, what this movie does, it basically slaps the whole franchise in the face. That's why they're calling it a reboot rather than a remake. Marcus Nispel, who also directed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003, which is also really good, he directs this one, and him and the writers, what they did, they basically took all their favorite bits of the first 4 movies and made this one, and decided to not make it so much an origin movie, but just to have like a straightforward, scary teen slasher Jason Voorhees kill fest. They succeeded. This movie features teenage sexuality. There are quite a few boobies in the movie, and there's also underage drinking and drug use. It's about teenagers, typical teenagers, and what they do when they go camping. Like, you guys are pushing it. Like, you know exactly the kinds of things that Jason doesn't like, and you do them. He's gonna show up. There's a lot of fake scares in this movie, like a guy knocks on the door, and then there's silence, and then a dog jumps up, and you're like, ugh! But I found that they actually made me jump out of my seat. They ask you to suspend your disbelief a little bit in this movie. Like, 1 second, Jason's 50 feet behind the girl, and then he appears in the tree, or next to the tree in front of her, and it's like, oh, how did he get? Oh, he can do what he wants. You just buy it. You just go along for the ride. It's a lot of fun. If there was one thing I could change about this movie, it's probably something I would change about every typical teenage slasher horror film. Why can't the victim characters of these movies ever be written, cast, and performed in a way that tries to portray them as typical, average, everyday teens?
You basically want Jason to show up 10 minutes into Superbad.
Yeah. Do you know how scary of a movie that would be? Do you know how traumatized I would be if I was watching Friday the 13th and one of the kids was an awkward Eastern European kid who collects comic books and doesn't have much luck with girls, but instead they went with the most unlikely grouping of teenagers ever. Rich asshole, his nice girlfriend, wacky Asian party dude who drinks beer out of his shoe, slutty girl, funny black guy who actually has a pretty funny part in the movie before he gets murdered. It's like a wide spectrum of ways that Jason chooses to kill people in. He's a master craftsman of murder. This movie ends up being kind of funny, kind of campy, but legitimately scary. And my final score for Friday the 13th is 8.7, which is a solid A. So banana sticker for you, Marcus Nispel. Good job.